As the gaming industry has evolved over its 50-year existence, objectively speaking, it has become a more stressful form of entertainment. It's not even a hot take. AAA developers in the past 15 years or so have shifted game development towards longer-lasting, competitive multiplayer games, especially in the modern era with the explosion of Call of Duty and Fortnite. The most likely reason for this is because it's more profitable and more justifiable to insert payable products such as visible cosmetics in a multiplayer setting under the guise of making it fair for newer players, or to quote-unquote reward dedicated players by making them stand out amongst casuals. It's very rare nowadays to see a game that doesn't have some form of action or requires you to use all of your mental faculties and plan ahead. If you look at every Game of the Year winner, with the exception of The Last of Us and It Takes Two, all of them emphasize and consist of some form of combat and strategy. Now, of course, I could just be cherry picking. Some of the most popular games dating back to its original popularization contain some form of advanced strategy or combat, with the exception of Mario. This was especially true with older arcade cabinets before the creation of the home console. Games like Pac-Man and Street Fighter required heavy thinking and strategy while reading your opponent or rudimentary AI. But I think the problem has only gotten worse in recent years. I want to call attention to the modern gaming scene because present-day consumerism has more or less accelerated this need for fast-paced, high-octane, action-first video games. The rise of esports and an increasingly shortened attention span has especially hurt the original appeal of video games as a stress-free wind-down escapism from life's problems. Tack on shareholder interest and increasing pressure to meet deadlines, it creates a dilemma of why delay to create a great single-player experience for the consumer and instead create a mediocre multiplayer product that we can continuously update and add payable content to increase the bottom line. Just like the content mill experience, it's a race to the bottom while trying to squeeze out every dollar along the way. Most games in the modern era have shifted from a memorable one-time experience to a grindfest with no foreseeable ending. There needs to be some type of antithesis to this, a sort of escape from the original escapism that the medium once created. And this is where the topic of the video comes in: comfort games. What is a comfort game? Well, that's a hard question to answer because there is no correct answer. Comfort games come in all shapes and sizes and are subjective from person to person. For example, Minecraft may be considered a relaxing experience for one person and an absolute stress fest for someone else, depending on how you like to play it. But if I were to give a broad definition, a comfort game is any game where you don't have to think too hard and provides a sense of relaxation or comfort for the player. Now, that's sort of a consensus definition based on social media, but I believe that there are 5 benchmarks that separate them from just your typical video game. Benchmark 1 is that controls are easy to learn or aren't mechanically difficult. I added the "or" in there because there are some games that do have simplistic controls but do require you to be good at executing them in a proper manner. For instance, there's only about 6 to 7 buttons in most fighting games, but no sane person in their right mind would consider them to be a comfort game, as you have to take time out of your day to learn complex button combos only to get smacked online by someone twice your age. Minecraft, like I mentioned earlier, is the complete opposite of this, having a bunch of keyboard control buttons, but at its core you really only need your 2 mouse buttons, WASD, crouch, and the inventory, with most of the others included for quality of life purposes. Movement, building, and PvE never require you to press more than 3 buttons at a time, which is why in comparison it's objectively easier to pick up the game. The overall goal is to provide a sense of simplicity by not needing to be mechanically perfect and execute at a high level consistently. The second benchmark is that the game is heavily gameplay oriented or heavily story oriented. Comfort games provide that sense of escapism by completely immersing you into its rich story or open-ended gameplay. During the dark ages of 2020, Animal Crossing New Horizons was able to captivate even non-gamers by basically being a sandbox with the comfort of Nintendo characters. It allowed people to forget about their problems by making you the sole editor of a completely customizable island. While it didn't necessarily move the needle in the sandbox genre, it was a refreshing take on a very old format. Conversely, story-rich games have that same effect. Being able to self-insert yourself into a fleshed-out story can make you feel like you're part of it yourself, which is just as important in getting lost in the game, arguably more so than the gameplay itself. So then what happens when you have both great gameplay and an enticing story? Well, then you have Game of the Year nominees.
What the dog doing?
The third benchmark is the lack of competition. Being able to go at your own pace without the pressure of people around you is a vital component to the sense of comfort. Being down in rounds in an FPS or currently being on a losing streak in a multiplayer game makes most people feel like shit and completely goes against what a comfort game stands for. For a game to have that specific feel, if it does have a multiplayer, competition is an optional challenge for the players or doesn't exist at all. Games like Stardew Valley or Terraria fundamentally don't push competition onto you, but it does allow enough leeway in gameplay to make it your own friendly challenges between others for fun. Basically, what I'm saying is winning is not the core appeal to enjoying the experience. The fourth benchmark follows up on the last one, being that it doesn't evoke strong emotions. The threat of death or losing and being put into 50-50 situations can be fun for some people, but not everyone. Games where you are constantly forced into high pressure scenarios where the outcome involuntarily forces you to feel strong feelings like stress, anger, or fear is not, what's the word? Oh yeah, comforting.
Close it. Wait. Open it.
Some of the best comfort games, in my opinion, do make you think and strategize about what you want to do next, that if it doesn't work out the first time, doesn't overly punish you and allows enough time to rethink your strategy without rebuilding from ground zero. Being able to tackle the same scenario with a different idea rewards the player for trying something new and creates a sense of personal accomplishment. And that segues into the last and most important benchmark, being it provides a sense of fulfillment. This one I feel is a bit more specific, but it remains true nonetheless. When I was thinking of this benchmark, this one felt more focused towards games that are very routine-esque and cyclical, like life sims or low-stress survival games with day and night cycles. There's a comfort in routine. Games where days are shorter and have a limited time frame force you to build in-game habits to optimize your time in the day, and some of the best ones also don't punish you if you can't get to everything in one day and just allow you to continue it tomorrow. This comes with the intended consequence of having to plan ahead and knowing what you're going to do next, like going to bed at 10 p.m. in Stardew Valley because God knows you're not doing it in real life. These excel as comfort games because every day you are achieving the incremental goals you set for yourself and at your own pace. You're not rushed by external factors like in reality, like deadlines set by our boss or having to think about the opportunity cost of choosing one activity over another. The straightforwardness of it all and being the master of your own destiny aids in unwinding and temporarily forgetting about life's problems. But of course, these are just generalizations because I believe any single player or non-competitive multiplayer game can be considered a comfort game. For example, a game that completely ignores 3 out of the 5 benchmarks is Celeste. It's a high stress, mechanically difficult, and frankly, extremely competitive game. As you keep playing and are the type of person to 100% things, the challenges presented to you only get increasingly more difficult. Yet because of how relatable it is in exploring one's own mental health struggles and the sense of accomplishment you get for being able to conquer every level in a game considered one of the hardest platformers in recent years, many see it as a comfort game. No casual person plays a video game the same way. That's why sub-communities even within the same titles exist. Some people like watching the beautiful sunset in a highly detailed world, and others like causing as much chaos as possible in a restricted setting. It's up to personal preference and how they like to enjoy their time within that game that defines it as comfort. Persona 3 Reload has been mine as of late when trying to unwind before going to bed, but I know that other people don't find the appeal to JRPGs, and that's okay. In my opinion, as long as it fulfills the last benchmark of providing a sense of fulfillment and comfort, then idealistically any game can fill that hole. Now, I've talked a lot about what defines a comfort game, but I haven't yet answered the question, why do we need them? And I think there's very human reasons that we need more of them in the gaming space. Firstly, we live in a work-oriented world where we idolize the person who never takes a day off and ostracize the person who isn't working 24/7. But in reality, no person is a machine, and no matter how strong you are, if you don't take a step back to assess your health and let yourself relax, you'll end up overdoing it and break not just physically, but mentally as well. Comfort games give us the mental stimulation we need, but in a way where it's simple, relatable, and not overwhelming. Routine and habit are essential to the human experience, and by consolidating it into one that only lasts a few hours, allows us to unwind from life and feel rewarded at the same time. I'm no mental health expert, but this is how I find myself getting so immersed into these types of games from personal experience. The second reason is that there comes a point in a person's life where days seem to fly by, experiences well together, and days seem to get monotonous. I myself, who's in my early 20s, is beginning to feel this phenomenon. I mean, shoot, it didn't feel like I uploaded my Hades video 2 weeks ago. As we get older, we begin to yearn for simpler times because unfortunately things only get more complex as we age. We learn about paying our own bills, surviving without our parents, and learning how to adjust to a world that isn't super welcoming to the inexperienced. Comfort games allow us to return to those simpler times, a time where we didn't have to think about all the nuances of life. Nostalgia is one hell of a drug. That's why many people consider Pokemon Emerald to be the best in the franchise despite objectively being the second worst selling one. Thankfully, we live in a time where, at least for the foreseeable future, gaming is a really accessible medium. Indie games have more or less taken over as the go-to when trying to find a comfort game, but I feel like there's also a responsibility on bigger developers to pump out good single-player games that aren't just console exclusives. I get that you need talking points to sell your console, and yeah, It's fun to find a diamond in the rough and claim you are one of the OGs, but gaming can also be a great shared experience outside of the multiplayer, and it's easier to build community that way when you already have devoted fans and not excluding people based on the console they play. Just look at Elden Ring. As the world gets harder to live in, the necessity for a tangible thing that someone can cling on to in hard times is becoming increasingly more important. People find solace in almost anything, whether it be books, the gym, and of course, video games. At the end of it all, we need more and better products so that when the well runs dry in one game, you can find that new yet familiar feeling to help you get through the temporary hardships of the real world. What game you find that turns out to be your little corner of the universe doesn't matter, as long as it provides the one thing that I've been talking about this entire video, which is comfort, fulfillment, and a short reprieve from the world around you. That's it. Thank you for 500. Subscribe, and have a great day.